Appreciate everybody joining. Today, we'll spend quite a bit of time on kind of some efforts that we obviously announced last week around Launch Nebraska, but also a few questions about protocols and conversations about activities going into the summer. Obviously, we're still underneath DHM through the end of May, but through May 31st. For those who didn't see it, I was able to join the governor for a press conference here this afternoon where he talked about several issues, but one of them being kind of around summer baseball and softball with the possibility of starting up after June 1st or on June 1st. And also, I think within that DHM, or at least proposal, will be some conversations about starting to open up the possibility of school facilities such as weight rooms in very limited ways, and beginning to kind of softly walk into how we can kind of begin to engage in some of those activities as we start. But again, in very limited ways is the intention. And I guess I'm going to turn it over to the governor for some initial comments, and then we'll dive into the rest of the agenda. So Governor, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure, my pleasure. Hey, so I thought what I'd do is just kind of bring you up to date broadly on where we are with regard to our efforts at the state, and then dig in specifically into the youth sports reopening guidelines. So first of all, where the state is today, we are better off than just even a few weeks ago with regard to the important tools we need to be able to combat the spread of coronavirus here in Nebraska. And again, just to remind everybody, it is about slowing the spread and making sure that we preserve our healthcare system, because it's a virus. We can't stop it from coming. But if we flatten the curve, as everybody's heard, what that does is that means it takes that peak when everybody gets it, it flattens it down so that you can manage everybody who needs a hospital bed or an ICU bed or a ventilator, and provide that to them in the healthcare system. And that's what we've done. We've done it very successfully. And of course, you all have been a big part of that. So thank you very much for all your efforts up to this point with regard to operating schools without kids in the classrooms, and all the work with regard to distance learning and feeding kids and all that sort of things. You guys have just done a wonderful job. So thank you very much for everything you've done to be able to get through these last couple of months, as I know it's been a lot of work. It's a lot of tough. There's no playbook on how to do this. This has been brand new for all of us. So thank you for what you're doing. With regard to the state level and what we're thinking about, the first is expanding testing. And last week we rolled out Test Nebraska, did a soft launch of that in Omaha and Grand Island. We have since expanded 2 more mobile testing sites to Lincoln and Schuyler. Schuyler started today, Lincoln started on Friday. We received back 2,358 tests. We've had 80 people test positive out of that group, and it's about a 3% test rate. And it's not surprising that those people are testing at a lower percent positive rate, because we're prioritizing healthcare workers, first responders, food processors, people who are not necessarily symptomatic. We're also doing people who are symptomatic as well. But again, if you're tossing a bunch of people who aren't symptomatic, it's a lot lower likelihood you're actually going to come across somebody who's actually testing positive. We also on Friday expanded that to 65 or older. We had a lot of people try and sign up. Slots got filled up. The system bogged down. The calls that were coming into the hotline were more than we can handle. So we're working on getting all that addressed. But, the good news is that does demonstrate there's a lot of demand out there for folks to be able to take this test. And so we want to make sure we get it scheduled. So what this will do when we're fully up and running is an additional 3,000 tests a day on top of the 1,500 tests a day we're doing already. And so, again, just a great way for us to be able to get an idea of what's going on in the state, assess how people are feeling with regard to symptoms, and then scheduling them to be able to get them in. And then the follow-up to that is contact tracing. So typically our local public health departments will have maybe 7 to 15 people who they can have do contact tracing. And it's important to contact the person who tested positive to make sure they're isolating, and then go back and find out all the people they've been associated with for the last 2 weeks, so those people will quarantine. And that's how you prevent the spread of the virus from the people we know have it and from the people that have been exposed and may have it. If we keep them all out of public circulation, then we can slow the spread of the virus. It's just standard epidemiology. And with local public health districts, we're the ones who are traditionally doing that. Well, we've stood up 6 teams at the state, and we'll have 2 more teams here this week, and that will give us about 300 people who will be able to assist with the contact tracing. And then we're looking at hiring private companies to be able to augment that. And then ultimately, we expect to get up to 1,000 people who are doing the contact tracing. So we do have, today we should have over 200 that are ready to go. We'll have actually 250 by Wednesday, and then by the end of the week, we should have 300 people at the state level who are doing it. That will get us, almost a third of the way there from where we want our goal to be, and that'll be really important with regard to following up and getting people to isolate. So that's a big important thing. PPE is another area where we are working to be able to buy the proper equipment from everybody. We're feeling pretty good about that. We've got a 60 to 90 day supply on hand for those important supplies, and we're getting those out. So feeling pretty good about that. Quarantine space, we've expanded that. We were working with UNK, UNO, and UNL to be able to provide a place for people to isolate, quarantine, do convalescence. We're working with hotel rooms in places like Grand Island where we don't have easy access to dorm rooms. We're also putting up first responders and so forth in hotel rooms so that they can, be accommodated without going back home and maybe getting the virus and that sort of thing. So really expanding, the access to some of those key tools that we have to be able to do that. And then, of course, we're also focusing on special effort on places where it's difficult to socially distance, like food processing plants and the long-term care facilities, where our folks from UNMC go out and do site visits to, help with best practices. As of Friday, we've been to 24 long-term care facilities and 13 food processing facilities. So again, the idea is to create these best practices like the meat processors COVID-19 playbook, which UNMC has produced, to really put out there for the industry to follow. In addition to that, we've today published guidelines around salons, barbershops, body art, otherwise known as tattoo parlors, and massage therapy. That was part of our DHM to allow those businesses to be able to start an operation, so we published those guidelines. And then today, which I think might be the most interest for you, is our youth sports guidelines. We decided to start with baseball and softball. Now, just to be clear, what we did is when we issued the directed health measures saying schools will operate without students till May 31st, that included canceling extracurricular activities. So throughout the month of May, there will be no team organized sports, no team organized practices, no team organized games. What we said, and some people took this to mean they could do anything they wanted, what we said is if you are a private business that, say, sells memberships, and then you bring people in to do coaching, like you have a pitching coach that brings in young ball players to do some coaching on that, that is separate from a team organized event that is part of a membership, that's allowable. That's part of a business. Some people took that to say, oh, well, I've got special permission to go do my team sports. Not true. Nobody has any permission to do that during the month of May. What we have put out guidelines, though, is that starting June 1st, we are going to allow schools to be able to, for example, if they want to open weight rooms for student athletes, that's going to be fine. Team organized practices for baseball and softball, unless circumstances dictate otherwise. For example, what I mean by that is, if assuming that things just don't take off on us, if we keep the health care system stable, then we'll go forward with this. But you'll only be able to do these team organized events under certain conditions. So, for example, starting June 1st, practices will be allowed, but dugouts will not be used. Players will have to be lined up against the fence at least 6 feet away. Parents got to remain in their cars after dropping off players. Players should use their own gloves, helmets, bats, as much as possible. Coaches are responsible for ensuring social distancing during practices to keep people, players away from each other to make sure they're not congregating together. Players must bring their own water to consume and their own snacks to consume. No using, shared drinking fountains or coolers or anything like that. And then, of course, coaches must sanitize the equipment before and after each practice. So these are some of the things that, and if somebody isn't doing this, the team may be suspended, or they may suspend the whole thing from the sports. And then starting June 18th, we're going to allow baseball and softball games can begin, but again, under certain circumstances. Same sort of guidelines with regard to players using their own bats, gloves, helmets, that sort of thing. You can use a dugout, but you've got to use the bleachers, between the dugouts for players, spread players out. They should have designated spots for their personal items. And again, coaches being responsible for all that. Household members will be able to attend the games and watch, but they can't sit in the bleachers. They got to bring their own chairs if they want to sit or stand during the game. Again, being 6 feet from everybody. The teams that are next to play must be provided a designated area for players to warm up that allows for social distancing away from the players who are currently playing. Post-game handshakes, that kind of, all that sort of stuff that we'd have that physical contact. We're trying to reduce that to as much as possible. When the game ends, the team leaving's got to sanitize the dugout area. No post-game talks. We want fans and players to leave back onto their cars immediately after the game. The team that's next, from a designated board member can come in and finish sanitizing and so forth. It can't come in until the other team's out of the dugout. So, again, we want fans that remain separate as well. Again, the whole idea is not to mix people. And same thing as far as communal snacks and water coolers and beverages and all that. So that's really going to be our guidelines, to be able to start with a sport that is a team sport that we think is relatively more socially distant than other team sports, and see if we can't make these guidelines work, get the teams to follow along and see if they're going to be following the rules with regard to this, so that we can, again, have people return to a more normal life, but not spread the virus in a way that is going to overwhelm the healthcare system. So that's really, again, we put our guidance out there. We've obviously put it out 20 days early, so people have a chance to take a look at this, and we'll be able to, give us feedback. And we've actually already sought a lot of feedback from different folks, but, there's always going to be things you may not have thought about. So we'll want to see if anybody does that. But hopefully what people do is take this in the spirit it was intended, make sure they're good practices of it. It's always the kind of thing that somebody can screw it up for everybody. And we hope that nobody does that, that everybody follows the guidelines, and that we're allowed to, have Little League baseball and softball come back for the summer starting in June. And with that, Commissioner, I will turn it back over to you, and we can pick up questions on this now, or we can talk about it later, or whatever you want to do.
Yeah, I've got a few folks have typed in some questions. So maybe one of them being just kind of the reality that with baseball, some school facilities are used. So, and I think it basically means that schools can open their facilities for baseball and softball use as appropriate underneath the DHM. Correct. So.
Yeah. So again, that is our intention. And again, it would be up to the school. So we're not going to tell you have to. This is really, again, the DHM will expire May 31st. That has really been the thing that has prevented that. So now it'll be kind of up to you all to decide if that's what you want to do on a school-by-school basis. So there'll be nothing preventing it, but of course you can set your own rules about how you want to do that.
And then, of course, we'll get a few more of these questions probably, but as you said, it is limited to baseball and softball, not other sports right now, not basketball, not volleyball, not football, not anything else. And
right. Yeah. Those. We made that determination based on just kind of the time of year and the demand and just the type of sport. So basketball, obviously, you're in much closer contact. Football, you're obviously in close contact, right, on a play-by-play basis. Volleyball, you're still pretty close to each other. Doubles tennis, there's nothing prohibiting that. Is that really a team sport? Technically, I suppose there's two people, but I'm not going to quibble over doubles tennis because you can keep far enough away from that. But as far as like the bigger team sports, we felt that this was one that was a good first step to kind of see how this would all work, and then allow other sports down the road as we got experience with this one, and got comfortable with feeling that people were going to follow the rules.
And so one question that we've had, and I've had actually with other places as well, is about sports camps. And obviously this would still apply for all of those as far as we know going forward. So anything other than baseball and softball, just to reiterate, is the answer, I believe. So.
Yeah, and so again, the sports camps are all going to be limited to that 10-person rule, or if they're doing it as an organized team, if it's a team, they could probably figure out a way to make that work. But again, they've got to kind of figure out a way to make that work within the scope of the guidelines.
Okay, so the guidelines will rule. So another question that pops up in the the weight rooms for schools. And I believe in the, at least the draft conversation so far that we've had, that weight rooms would be included for schools to use as long as they follow the same guidance as
Gyms, yeah.
Right. So it is
Yeah, health
possible.
clubs. So again,
yeah.
Yeah, so again, 10 people at a time, 6 feet distance between equipment, sanitizing between use, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so we'll kind of keep promoting that guidance as it exists out there. And then let's see, I'm trying to see if I saw another question that was in that realm. If I find something else, I'll let you know anyway. But I think otherwise, part of the transition, I think, and part of the conversations we'll have is what's this mean for summer school. So I think as we kind of go on, I see a few questions in here around that, and I want to talk to that. So thanks, Governor, for that, and hopefully you're able to stay with us for the rest of the time if it works out. So thanks.
Yep.
Thanks a lot. So we have I think we've got a couple other guests, or at least one other guest. I think Myra Stoney's on, and I think we had Gina Ewing. I don't see that she's on the call, but Myra is from Southwest Nebraska, the area I call home, I guess. So Myra, you're welcome to unmute and join in the conversation a little bit. So, and just because her picture's up doesn't mean she's actually, oh, she is there. Hi, Myra.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can, thanks.
Okay, so I am the health director for Southwest Nebraska Public Health. So we cover 2 counties of ESU 16, which is Perkins and Keith County. We also cover all of ESU 15, and we cover part of Eustis is in ESU 11, and I believe all of Furnace County is in ESU 11. So if you guys don't know where we are next to Colorado and Kansas. We have been, and I shouldn't say this out loud, but we have been the fortunate health district. We have a total of 41,000 people. We have 6 hospitals, and to date, as of today, we have 13 positive cases, of which 11 have recovered. So I'm saying we are the fortunate health district because we have the lowest numbers, and I tease the other health directors at times that we have special air out here, and that's why our numbers are so low. However, that is just a joke, but wanted to let you know what we're doing with our schools. I think we've had several schools call us on ideas for graduations, and I think for the most part, we've gotten through those, most of those questions. We did have some questions around sports, and I was very excited to hear the governor talking about just now about tennis and camps. One of the thoughts I had was, if they're opening up the weight rooms, then the tennis courts should be allowed to be open. That would make sense to me. And I heard that they were going to keep their camps to 10 people or less, and that was something I felt comfortable with. And so I felt that was a green light for Southwest Nebraska. Our directed health measure went into effect May the 4th. And it expires May the 31st. And what our directed health measure is saying at this time is that we could have churches open up. We have restaurants in our area opening up. And we limited our restaurants to only those who are on the Department of Ag's restaurant list, as was given to us. And so some of the bars were not happy with us, but if they don't have a food license, they don't get to open. We also continue to follow our stay at home if we have high risk, limit our groups to 10 people. We're wearing our masks. Our hair salons, barber shops, massage therapists, and tattoo parlors were allowed to open up on May 4th, and we've been hearing great success with that. Most people are following the rules of the patrons and the persons delivering the service wearing their masks. And I think mostly, I haven't seen a lot of people in restaurants yet in our area. I think a lot of people are very cautious, and that would be representative of Southwest Nebraska. if you have any questions for me, I'd be welcome to answer. I'd be open to answering those now.
So thanks, Myra. And I think one of the things that, we continue to try to work on is our efforts around Launch Nebraska and just coming up with protocols for, schools working with local health officials about, kind of sorting through some of this. Is that still, kind of, I'll say acceptable to you? Is that the best way to kind of continue to discuss that on how we work with local health officials?
Yes.
And that's the simplest answer. So good answer.
I'm sorry. I normally talk a lot. I didn't know what else you wanted me to say.
I think that's good. So I think Gina Ewing may be on, but I don't know if we have found her for some reason. So if we do track her down, Drew, in the background to make her a panelist, that would be helpful. I thought I saw a question pop up that was from Gina. And I'm not seeing it right now. So Myra, thanks so much for joining us, and you're welcome to stay on. I'm gonna go to the next slide and we'll come back to Gina if we track her down. I wanna talk a little bit with Craig Lofquist as the ESUs have been kind enough to kind of keep organizing kind of some areas of questions. And Craig, thanks for joining today.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think everybody is aware that Launch Nebraska is out there. These are the three biggest areas of questions that were coming our way. If you could speak a little bit to the Launch Nebraska, and I think maybe you're going to do that throughout the presentation. But also there were a number of questions on CARES Act funding and the process that will entail in order to capture those funds or get them to the districts. Maybe some of the limitations on the use of those funds. And then as you can see, going through the Q&A, there are questions about summer school. With that directive health measure that ends at the end of this month, how much is that going to change our lives? And if you could speak to that, that would be great. And then I have one last thing, I'm throwing a lot at you, is the petition that was filed. Could you give us just a brief update on that? Because the one thing that we've heard about is the Reading Improvement Act. There's still some questions about that and how that might be handled.
Yeah, so I'll kind of hit on a few of these, and if I forget one, Craig, just let me know. We can discuss
thanks. I threw a lot at you. I appreciate it. Thanks.
So certainly we will spend a little bit more time on Launch Nebraska, and I just want to highlight to folks that the beginning protocols and our efforts to get into certainly even into the summer, I encourage folks to kind of begin to dive into that. I will be working with the, I have the Commissioner Advisory Committee and other groups as well that will start working on Launch Nebraska, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more here in a second. And then CARES Act funding. So I anticipate, in fact, we might have a slide on this, so I'll probably steal some thunder from whomever was going to address this, but next week, I think I've got it down right. Next week is when we anticipate trying to submit Nebraska's application for the I guess they call it ESSERS funding going forward. So we'll begin to do some of that work. We have a total of 65 million, as you can now see on the slide. We'll reserve the roughly 10% for some of the statewide uses. So school districts will have that allocated out on essentially the Title 1A formula. And part of the challenges, and I know the governor has CARES Act funds as well, we're trying to make sure that ours are really well aligned with the strategies that we have as a state. And so I appreciate folks submitting responses on our surveys, and we'll build a plan with that. And I think even just on Friday, there was more guidance released relative to the expectations around CARES Act funding. One of the things is the desire is to push the funds out quickly, but you find that there are some strings sometimes attached to those federal funds, and we want to make sure we're doing that well. So summer school, I think, is one of those other topics that was on the list, and I've seen quite a few questions, so I'm probably not get to all of them, but it is my desire that we, first of all, I've said from the beginning, prepare for remote learning in summer school, but I am hopeful that we're able to get to some in-person side of this. And I think we need to spend the next, kind of couple weeks looking at what some of those safe protocols are for various students. Obviously, as we're opening up for other potential uses in schools, including baseball, I saw a question about, well, we ought to do academics first, and I think that makes some sense. And again, as long as it fits the other protocols, that gives us a chance to start to kind of build a specific set of protocols around summer school. And so again, we'll be using Launch Nebraska to kind of tie those pieces of the puzzle together. I think the last point, Craig, was around the point on the petition, the Rule 62 petition, and thanks Craig and ESU CC for submitting that. The petition there's a whole series of things that we'll start addressing. We actually have staff working on that now, and we'll address many of those things by the time we get to the June board meeting. And the board, I anticipate the board will actually take those things up. You'll see us continue to trickle out information today. I think there's some more information on the Reading Improvement Act. Many of those smaller things, as I've said before, and they're not necessarily small in a normal day, but things like the Pledge of Allegiance and otherwise, we've really encompassed within our Rule 10 guidance that we've already sent out to have folks address in that fashion. But we'll continue to kind of chip away at those things over the next few weeks on that front. So, Craig, is there anything else I missed in that?
I think you got it all. Thank you.
I don't know how I did that because I was getting quick, but I appreciate that. If there's more that pops up, just join in. Hey, I see Gina Ewing is back on. I guess she was on all along. We lost her somewhere out in cyberspace. So Gina, you want to introduce yourself, and you probably heard what Myra had to say. Can you give a little background about the situation as you see it in the Elkhorn Public Health Department?
Yes. Hi, I'm Gina Ewing, the health director from Wisner, Nebraska, and I serve Burt, Cummings, Stanton, and Madison counties. We have about 56,000 people in our district. In full disclosure, I was not lost in cyberspace. I just didn't follow the directions very well, so I was on the guest link and not the panelist. So I think I need to go back to school. So right now in our district, as of today, we did not fare as well as my friend Myra in Southwest Nebraska. We have 298 cases in our area and have widespread community spread going on in all of our counties. Right now, our biggest contributor to that number is the meatpacking plant that we have in Madison County. And we were happy with, even though our number is high, we do have an impressive result from mass testing there, which we were pleasantly surprised to see that the results did not come back as high as what they did in other parts of Nebraska and the nation. So we're actually sitting really good. Most of our people have recovered from the virus. We have 3 deaths in our area. Right now we are working on directed health measures, the same as what Myra had mentioned. However, my district is starting to relax measures on this coming Wednesday, the 13th, whereas I think Myra started this process on May 4th. Right now we are just kind of gearing up for that gradual relaxation and are anxious to see what that ends up resulting in case counts for us in time. Right now, I'm just looking at my numbers here because they're coming in by the minute. Right now, we are working with our schools on the same things that I'm sure my other counterparts in the state are fielding questions about graduation ceremonies and summer school and all of those things, and the return of items back to the school now that the school year is coming to a close. And I think that we have a pretty good strategy in place for each school to do what will work for them and doesn't really put anybody at undue risk. So if there's any questions from anybody, I would answer those. Otherwise, I will pass it to the next person on the agenda.
Yeah, and thanks, Gina. I don't necessarily see any more questions, but as far as maybe kind of same question to you, as far as trying to work with schools as we start to open up and relax things, is that process still working? You working with ESUs, you working with school districts? Is that still a functional process for you?
Yeah, we're split between ESU 2 and ESU 8. So we have been doing calls weekly with both of those ESUs. So yeah, we're working with those ESU schools and just kind of fielding questions as they come up.
Yeah. So, well, thanks for continuing to do that, and we'll kind of keep working on processes that help. And so I appreciate that. So I appreciate both Myra and Gina for joining today. And if something else pops up here in the next half hour, we'll engage on that. So I want to shift gears to, and I have Jay Beller on the call as well. And so I thought it might be worth talking sports a little bit together, given the timing with baseball and softball. Jay and I spoke a little bit earlier today about what that may mean. Obviously, with weight rooms, I've seen more questions on weight rooms and where we're going. I'll try to re-explain that, and then certainly, Governor, as you feel the need, jump in too. So, Jay, thanks for being here, and I'll kind of open it up to you, and then we can dialogue a little bit about kind of some next steps as we see it from your perspective. So.
Well, thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. Yeah, at the NSA, we're excited to get going as much as we can with the parameters that we have put in place, and it's a starting position is where we're at. I've had a lot of calls asking for more. I've had some calls asking that how are we going to do this as a state? We talk about equity in the NSA. Can one part of the state open up before the other part of the state gets to? And so that's what our staff has been working at for the last week or so. And we are planning on opening June 1st our summer guidelines. And then we will do that in accordance with the local and state health measures that are in place at that time.
So, Jay, as we kind of continue down this track, and I don't know what the rules governing kind of sports and sports practices generally are without this coronavirus side of the equation, so I probably tread on territory I maybe don't understand, but typically you would see teams using weight rooms, or at least potentially them doing that. And I think underneath this guidance, right, or what will come out by June 1st, is weight training and other things will be permissible as long as schools are following restrictions that are otherwise in place, 10 persons and strict cleaning and all those different things. But is that kind of how you see that at the moment?
Yeah, that's how we kind of see that the weight rooms would be open along with the conditioning programs that we usually have in the summer to prepare those kids for all type of activities that they're in throughout the summer and the year. Now, we probably need to get some more clarification, because I heard it, and I know that there's a lot of questions out there about camps that would pertain to basketball and football and other sports, as long as they stayed under the 10 and they don't have of course, the contact or anything. Can they work on the fundamentals and things like that? So that's probably some things that we need to get clear.
So it might be one of those. I don't know if, Jay, if you're willing to kind of describe kind of how you're gathering up with folks from NSAA and having some, I don't know what they're calling it, task force or something, conversation.
Yeah, I think we're just looking for an advisory committee, and some people have already contacted me, and we're going to try not to have it huge, but we want to make sure that all parts of the states are taken into consideration, as well as the bigger schools and the smaller schools. So it's probably going to be a committee of 14 or 15, probably 2 or 3 board members on that. Then we have some health people that we asked to serve on there, and they were most gracious to do that, along with some superintendents and some AEDs, so we can get perspective throughout the states, because we know that some states are getting hit harder than others, but but we do want to get going as long as the health professionals think it's okay for us to do. So that's going to be coming out very shortly, because when this June 1 date comes, we want to have a plan in place that is workable for all schools, and they know what that is.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Jay. As I've offered to Jay, I mean, I think we want to kind of use some kind of cross collaboration and make sure that we're posting information into the Launch Nebraska side, and hope they can use some of that to help provide guidance, so we can kind of have some consistent approaches to how we arrive at different protocols and decisions. But hopefully that will become helpful as we keep moving forward. So Jay, thanks again, and please stay on. I see a couple more questions I'll just take on in transition maybe to the next part. There's still conversations about high school graduations and whether or not in-person things can be done. And I do think that as we get through the end of May and into June, I think as we've always suggested, that once we got past May 31st, some more in-person things would start to open up. Obviously, we're getting in position to start to look at that. We'll continue to have some dialogue on that front. And I don't know who asked the question, but I see some question on here about high school graduations occurring after June 18th, following baseball, softball participation guidelines. I think those start to become reasonable assumptions about how to gather people in groups. Remember, we're still learning from this. If we see some substantial change in the spread of the virus and concerning practices, that'll change it. But I think, as the governor had kind of said, we're hoping to learn from those environments as we go forward. So I want to go ahead and transition. I'm going to introduce Lane Carr. Some of you know Lane Carr is an agency director on accountability. Lane is helping work with the team, work with me on kind of our Launch Nebraska efforts, and helping kind of project manage that across the board. And thanks, Lane, for joining to kind of share an update. I think I gave him this assignment like last week, so we'll see how this goes. But thanks, Lane, for being here.
You bet. Well, thanks for having me, Commissioner. And I am glad for an opportunity to just share a little bit more about Launch Nebraska, which was launched last week at the governor's press conference. And we understand that this is a lot, right? There are so many considerations as we think about next steps through the summer and into the fall, and what that even looks like. The academic, the social emotional, the technology, the summer school needs, and then thinking about schools as this like really critical piece for overall community health and safety and well-being. And so we tried to, with Launch Nebraska, provide a way for us to make it a little bit more digestible by providing a structure and a framework for us to think about the multiple pieces and the multiple levels for entering into this conversation and working together as we get into the fall. So I would just show you, as this screen depicts, that there are three broad pillars around leadership and planning, the conditions for learning, and then the continuity of learning that is really embedded throughout all of that. And underneath there, we have 7 overarching principles that you, again, can see. And if you haven't already checked out the website, I would encourage you. It's just that launchne.com. What you'll see at the current website is really what we're describing as phase 1. It's some information that we were able to use and collaborate with an organization called Opportunity Labs. And it's really helpful for us to think through, what should we be doing right now? What do we need to be doing before school starts? And then what does the fall look like as we really move in? But know too that this is continuously developing and evolving. And this phase 2 is really kind of what we're hearing from the commissioner and the rest of the panelists today, is really those specific resources that are Nebraskaized, if you will. And then following up with not only resources, but the professional learning around there. Throughout all of this, both phase 1 and phase 2, we've been really focused on the following things: making sure that equity is at the forefront and the through line across all of these pillars and the broad principles. We also know that we have to have safety at the forefront of our conversation and at the top of our mind. We're also really thinking about the ways we can collaborate with you, hear from you, hear your ideas, build these things, answer your questions all at once, and then house all of those new pieces of information, resources, and professional learning within this structure and within this website. And then at the end of the day, we know that every district, all 244 districts, are very different. And so we have to ensure that you have the information and the tools necessary to make the decisions, a lot of the decisions at the local level. So just know that there's a lot more coming, that there's going to be a rollout of more resources as we go through this. Again, right now, I would highly encourage you and your leadership teams to start thinking about some of these pieces, some of the decisions, some of the processes that you can already begin to put in place. I did just also want to put a plug in. One of the streams of learning that we do have built out is what Cory Epler was speaking about last week. And you'll find information on the Launch Nebraska site. That stream that professional learning series really begins this Thursday. So there's still room to sign up, and would just highly encourage you to go there. You'll see my contact information there. I would love to collaborate, hear any thoughts on ways we can improve the site and ways we can add additional information.
So thanks for that, Lane, and appreciate kind of the update. We'll kind of keep working. As I mentioned before, we'll have my commissioner's advisory group, other advisory groups will continue to do work with NSAA across those kind of 4 pillars and across a lot of different partners. And so a lot of the how do we do something questions that folks have, we're going to be chipping away out collectively. So I appreciate that very much. So I'm going to move on. I think Cory Epler is going to join for the next part with Nebraska Reads and a little efforts on unfinished learning in our instruction going forward. So thanks.
Thanks, Commissioner. Yeah, and Lane, I appreciate the little plug for the virtual professional learning series that starts this Thursday. So building off some of the conversations that we've had around unfinished learning, we're going to kick off our work this Thursday, 4:30 Central Time, with the CEO of Unbound Ed, Lacey Robinson, really to ground this work in instructional equity too. And then over the course of the next several weeks, continuing the conversation around unfinished learning in mathematics and literacy, but then also really digging deeper into supporting students with disabilities, our English learners. We have a session talking about leveraging assessment, and we'll have NWA help us facilitate that session. And then also talking about supporting independent science learning for the summer as well. The last webinar is June 15th, and it's called Planning to Pivot. So that's where we really think we'll be able to make that significant shift from planning for summer learning and the types of supports that districts may be interested in to really a more focused and intentional effort around the fall. I know that there were some questions about the Reading Improvement Act, and certainly, as we get through the summer, we recognize that there may be some things that we do need to ask for a statutory waiver on from the governor, specifically around the requirement to assess within the first 30 days of the school year. But some of that is to be determined as we approach the end of summer. So I know my staff is working out building virtual supports to support individualized reading improvement plans for students. So if you have questions, please email me or Dr. Abby Burke. She is also one that can provide some support in that. So again, thanks. And if you have questions, please let me know.
So thanks, Cory, and I appreciate that. Hey, a couple of questions I just saw in summer school that I'll try to answer live, and by the way, I think we're able to capture these questions and kind of keep working on them. I know I'm probably missing some, but one of the questions around summer school is how soon could we have kind of some protocols, what those protocols might look like for small groups. Again, I think later this week, we'll be trying to put some of that together. I mean, as we've watched different sectors be able to start to open up and try different things. We're trying to learn from those environments. And, you know, I know the governor's efforts in different sectors, we can actually beg and borrow different elements of that to try to put something together. But June, you know, starting June 1st is at the soonest, obviously, for a lot of those different things for us in schools right now. So again, we'll keep working on that. I think some of that will come together, and I appreciate the questions. So I guess I'm at the wrap-up slide. Was there anything else? I didn't know if we had somebody else on from staff that wanted to address the, I may have covered it so well, the CARES Act part. Maybe we don't have anyone else on for that particular point. Could we go back to the CARES Act slide? Because it feels like I missed something in that mix. I think the one thing that I wanted to talk about that I haven't covered yet on CARES Act, just so folks know, in addition to the funds going out by Title 1A formula, there is a provision for equitable services similar to what we would normally have underneath title programs. I've been working with staff and talking to non-publics, and we'll be working with you as well to try to have as streamlined as possible process for determining those equitable funds and being able to get that out. So that'll be part of the thing. I want everyone to know that that's also in the work. And again, we'll try to get that application for CARES Act funding out by May 22nd. So I do want you to know there are some expectations around those particular funds that are pretty well spelled out within the law. And as those are released, you'll have a sense of what you're able to do. And I know Bryce and our finance team will be making sure to have that stuff coordinated. What we don't want to get caught on the back end is having to do a lot of other reporting. And I think we've got a good handle on that. So appreciate all those efforts. I'm going to see if the governor has anything. Here's, I guess there is a question. It's probably a good one for CARES Act related things. Internet access being limited in rural places. And Governor, I know you and I talked a lot about trying to use some of the CARES Act funds for at least addressing some of those gaps. And we're also trying to have schools come up with some other creative ways that can do that. But I didn't know if there was something you wanted to end on that front or anything else on the CARES Act.
Yeah, just so we know that we know that's an issue, and I would say just stay tuned because we're working on it.
All right, yeah. And I appreciate that. We've had good partnership on those fronts too. So, and I know, let's see, there's probably some other question I've had on that front. Governor, do you have any just kind of last thoughts for the group as we press forward, or anything that you heard that you want to respond to? The floor is yours.
No, just that, again, I just appreciate everybody's work, and, you know, we're all learning through this together. So this next step with baseball and softball will be a learning experience that then we will be able to apply to other sports as we go down the road. So I'm anxious to get the feedback on people over the next 3 weeks, and then we'll roll this out June 1st.
All right. Well, I appreciate it very much. I mean, other panelists that are still on, if you had any final thoughts or things you wanted to cover, I do see, I think we got a lot of questions in the Q&A, so I think we've covered a lot of them, but we'll find some that we didn't get covered, and we'll try to address that too. So Craig or Jay, any final thoughts from your perspective?
No, but thanks for everybody's work.
Yeah, thanks, Craig.
Yeah, Matt, I would say the same. Thank you. And we're all in this together. And if we work together and follow these conditions, hopefully things will get better and we can continue on opening more things up.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I know what I really do encourage folks to go to the Launch Nebraska site and start kind of diving into questions from your own perspective. There's a lot of details that we have to think about, everything from what happens day to day and how restrooms are cleaned, all the way up to how buses and transportation works, to obviously we've spent a lot of time on sports today, but I think we can learn lessons across those areas as well. And so everything down to classrooms, what we're trying to learn in the childcare arena and what that could impact us for summer as well. So I just appreciate everyone's kind of attention. We'll kind of keep pressing forward, and thank you very much for joining today, and stay tuned, I guess, is the right way to go. So, again, thanks a lot. We'll take care. Talk to you, I guess, next Monday, same time. So take care.
All right. Thanks, Commissioner.
You bet.